Every neighborhood has rules, and every rule has a reason. But here, the reason is buried, deep beneath perfect lawns. Welcome to Horrificial. The Wilkins family had been searching for a quiet place to start over. Robert and Claire Wilkins, along with their 14-year-old son Ethan, drove into Hollow Creek on a breezy Sunday morning. The streets were lined with flawless lawns, mailboxes were freshly painted, and every house looked like it had been built yesterday. A large banner fluttered in the wind. Welcome to Hollow Creek, where community is forever. Claire exhaled. It's perfect. Robert smiled. Finally, a neighborhood that actually takes care of itself. Ethan stared out the car window. Yeah, too perfect. The house they bought was a white colonial on Ridgeway Lane. A little too cheap. A little too pristine. They hadn't even unpacked when a woman in a crisp navy blazer showed up on their porch. "Hi there. I'm Madison Rook," she said, her smile tight and rehearsed. "I'm the president of the HOA. Welcome to our family." Her handshake was cold, like metal left out at night. That evening, Madison returned with a packet of HOA rules, thicker than their mortgage agreement. One line, however, was highlighted in red ink. Residents are not permitted to attend or inquire about quarterly HOA council meetings. Attendance is for board members only. Robert frowned. That's weird. Aren't HOA meetings supposed to be public? Madison tilted her head like a doll. We prefer to keep things orderly. The board meets below ground, in the council chamber. It's tradition. Below ground? Claire repeated. Madison smiled wider. You'll get used to it. The first night in their new home, Robert woke to a low, rhythmic thumping beneath the floorboards. It wasn't the pipes. It wasn't the house settling. It sounded like a heartbeat. Ethan, wide awake in his room, heard it too, but what unsettled him more was the faint whispering beneath it, like dozens of people chanting in a language that didn't belong in a cul-de-sac. The next morning, Madison waved from across the street like nothing had happened. The Wilkins tried to blend in. Neighbors smiled but never waved first. No children played outside. The lawns were always perfectly mowed, at the same length. On Wednesday night at precisely 11:47 p.m., every porch light in the neighborhood went out at once. 1 minute later, a row of hooded figures walked down the street in silence, each carrying a black lantern. Ethan pressed his face to the window. "Mom, they're going underground." In the center of the cul-de-sac, a section of the pavement lifted like a trap door. One by one, the figures disappeared beneath it. Then the ground closed. When the lights came back on, the street was empty. The next day, Robert asked the neighbor across the street, a gray-haired man named Mr. Benson, about what they'd seen. Benson's smile didn't reach his eyes. Best not to ask about things that keep us safe. Safe from what? Robert asked. Benson leaned in close. The ground remembers everything. Robert was never good at following strange rules. That Friday night, when the lights went out again, he crept outside. Claire begged him not to. Ethan followed anyway. They hid behind a hedge as the hooded figures assembled once more. This time, Madison led the way, carrying something wrapped in a cloth that dripped dark liquid. They watched as the group opened the hidden hatch in the middle of the cul-de-sac. A long, spiraling staircase descended into blackness. A low hum rose from below, deep and alive. Robert whispered, "What the hell is this place?" Ethan's breath fogged in the air. "Dad, it's breathing." The next night, Robert returned alone. He lifted the steel hatch after midnight, careful not to make a sound. A wave of cold air poured out. The stairs led into a massive underground chamber carved from black stone. At the center stood a circular pit, filled with something that pulsed like flesh. The walls were covered with names etched in bone-white paint. Thousands of names. Madison and the board members stood around the pit chanting, "We feed the root. The root protects the hollow." Robert ducked behind a column, but then he saw it. On the wall closest to him, beneath hundreds of others, a new name had been painted in wet red strokes. Wilkins. He froze. Madison's head tilted upward as if she could feel him there. "Welcome," she said calmly, though she hadn't turned around. You shouldn't be here yet, he ran. The staircase behind him was no longer stone, and it was flesh, tightening and pulsing like a throat. The hatch slammed shut above. Claire woke to find the living room windows fogged from the outside. Ethan's bedroom door wouldn't open. The thumping beneath the floor was now deafening, and it wasn't coming from one spot anymore. It was coming from everywhere. The lawn outside shifted like breathing skin. The board emerged at dawn, robes smeared with soil and something darker. Madison stood in front of the Wilkins house with a clipboard. Good morning, Claire. Welcome to your initiation. Ethan screamed from inside the walls. The ground beneath the house cracked open and roots, thick, black, and wet, wrapped around the foundation. The house shuddered like it was alive. Robert awoke deep beneath the cul-de-sac, chained to a stone altar. Madison stood over him, her voice calm. This neighborhood is protected by what sleeps below. Every family feeds the root eventually. It's how we stay untouched. No storms, no sickness, no death, except yours. In the pit beside him, something ancient moved, slow and patient, like a god that didn't care if it was loved or feared. The HOA assembled one last time. The neighbors stood in neat rows, chanting the same words Robert had heard beneath his floor. The root protects the hollow. The hollow feeds the root. Claire and Ethan were dragged to the center of the cul-de-sac. The pavement split open once again, revealing the glowing chamber beneath. Robert was forced to kneel at the edge of the pit. Ethan screamed. Madison raised her lantern high. The soil remembers, she whispered. Robert closed his eyes, waiting for the end. But it didn't come. Instead, the ground beneath Madison split open. Black roots wrapped around her body, dragging her downward. She didn't scream. She smiled. Her voice echoed as she disappeared into the pit. It always needs a president. The roots slithered across the ground and wrapped around Robert's ankles. Ethan cried, "Dad, no!" The voice came, not from Madison, not from the crowd, but from below. The next caretaker is chosen. The roots didn't kill Robert. They pulled him down alive. 1 week later, the listing for the house on Ridgeway Lane disappeared from the market. Madison's name vanished from the HOA board. A new one appeared. Robert Wilkins, president. The lawns were greener than ever. The houses gleamed. And beneath the street, the ancient thing purred in satisfaction. Claire and Ethan's house looked perfect again from the outside, but if you stood close enough at night, you could hear something moving beneath the porch. Something whispering, "The next family was already on their way. The roots have been fed, but they're never full. Someone else will move in. Someone else will disappear, and the circle will keep growing." If this story kept you breathing a little faster, subscribe for the next one, because the next neighborhood is even darker.